Watch KSTV weeknights at 7:30 and 11 Eastern, and anytime with Inside On Demand on Channel 103.
Now, the Governor's Cup matchup between UK and U of L is only 19 days away, and Joker Phillips still has a number of things to sort out before then. And to help us get up to date on what's happening in Lexington, we now welcome in Ben Jones from Cats Illustrated. Ben, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I guess the biggest thing right now is the ongoing quarterback competition. You're there at practice every day. Talk about where that is and what's the latest on that position.
I think I'd probably stand with the same position as most people. I'd say that I'd be surprised if Maxwell Smith wasn't a starter for the opening game. And right now it looks like Morgan Newton is probably going to be his backup. And then Patrick Tolles and Jalen Whitlow are kind of battling as freshmen, see if one of them can make an impact this year.
Is that a change? It seemed like after that first scrimmage that maybe Morgan Newton maybe had an edge. I think everybody assumed starting the year that Maxwell Smith was the favorite, but Morgan played a little better from what I understand in that scrimmage. Is over the last couple of days, have you felt the shift back to Max Smith being the leader there?
You know, it really is so hard to tell since we're not allowed to watch the scrimmage and we're not allowed to be in practices. We heard kind of a couple different things coming out of that scrimmage. Joker said that, he's going to evaluate the quarterback situation based on what he sees in this camp, not based on last year, which would seem to indicate that Morgan was going to get a pretty fair shot. But then Randy Sanders that same day said that it certainly looks like Morgan is coming off a 6-7 month layoff from that torn labrum surgery, and that there are still some things that he's having trouble doing out there.
You know, we heard in the media guide and when we talked with Joker about passing the ball. That's something they want to be really committed to this season, finding ways to move the chains through the air. But it seems like the last couple of days, what we've heard mostly about is running backs. They have a lot of running backs they feel good about, maybe not one that has really emerged as the superstar yet, but they're talking a lot about those freshman running backs. They've got some veterans there. Kind of talk to us about that position and what Joker's saying to you guys about that.
Yeah, the thing that we've heard the most about the running backs the last couple of days is about the two freshmen, Dyshawn Mobley and Justin Taylor. I think going into camp, I probably expected one of them to play. Wasn't really sure how that was going to shake out, but we asked Joker yesterday if he thought one of them was going to play. And he said based on what he's seen, they both will. So this is entirely possible that you could see two freshman running backs have a pretty big role for Kentucky this year, in addition to some of those veterans that they have coming back.
Do you get the feeling the offensive line last year, I think, was a little bit of a disappointment. Everybody expect that to kind of be a strong point. This season, there's a lot of opportunity there, which most people would say, well, taking a step back, but they seem a little optimistic about that. Do you think that's kind of the key to the whole thing, whether no matter who the quarterback is, the wide receivers, the running back, it's really about that offensive line this season?
Certainly one of the keys, when you look at the offensive line this year, it was expected to be far more productive last year than it was. And I think they were hoping that this year could be far more productive than people are expecting it to be. Last year, there were just injuries all season long on the offensive line. I think from the first day of camp, Stuart Hines got hurt, and they just couldn't quite stay healthy as a unit after that. They've been pretty healthy through camp this year, so I think they're hoping that those guys can gel over the next 2 or 3 weeks and really come together for the start of the season.
Defensively, we hear all summer long talking about the defensive line. Rick Minter says he's excited because there's finally SEC caliber bodies up there. He has big bodies. But really, I think to fans, and to me at least, what really stands out is the linebackers. There are a lot of young linebackers that were pretty highly regarded coming out of high school. The staff has talked about having a lot of potential, and maybe Avery Williamson ahead of the pack. Joker said this week that he thinks he's ready to kind of take a leadership in that role. What do you expect from that linebacking core, and what are you hearing about which guys can be those big play guys?
Yeah, I get asked about the linebacking core a lot, and that's probably natural when you lose 4 starters from one position group. I think Avery Williamson will be pretty solid there. He was among the top 5 on the team in tackles last year, even though he didn't start a game, which is pretty impressive feat. And then Bud Dupree is another guy that Joker has been singing his praises since the end of last year. Bud told me last week that his goal this year is to have at least 2 sacks every game. At least 2 every game. If he did that, he would tie the NCAA single-season record for sacks. Obviously, it's a far way away from that, but he's setting his goals pretty high, and Avery Williamson wants to lead the SEC in tackles. Otherwise, I think Miles Simpson is pretty strongly entrenched at what was formerly the Winston Guide position, the Sam linebacker. And Malcolm McDuffin is probably the starter right now with the Will linebacker, where Danny Trevathan was last year. But Demarius Ransford, maybe a couple other younger guys could be pushing him there as well.
That bravado from the linebackers is interesting because we talked with Larry Vaught last week, and he said that he thinks this team needs guys with that Dickie Lyons personality, that will talk about making plays and then go out and make plays. Do you get the feeling as from the start of the summer to now, I feel like it's gotten more optimistic around the program. Of course, no games have been played yet, but do you get the feeling that these guys really are buying into the optimism Joker's talked about, and they're clearly talking about big plays? Do you think that's the feeling throughout the whole team?
Yeah, one of the things I was most surprised to hear this summer was when I sat down and talked to Randy Sanders, and he said that he feels a lot better this year than he did at this time last year. Now that says something when the offense was 118th in the nation last year. I think it would be hard for the offense to be any worse, and they probably should be a little bit better. Whether or not that shows up on the record, we won't know until games start going. But I think that there certainly is a sense of optimism right now. It's August and everybody's undefeated, and they do have a chance to put together a much better season than last year.
All right, before we let you go, we have to ask you about the ice bath you took at practice the other day. Joker Phillips tweeted out the picture. You were sitting in the ice bath. Give us a story behind that, and you're thawed out. It looks like you're doing okay.
Yeah. The funny thing about that is that I agreed to do it on the condition that none of my fellow reporters would tweet about it or write about it. I didn't want to end up on the news. But, when the head coach does that, what else are you going to do? It actually was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was pretty cold, but I think I'd made it out in my head to be a little bit worse than it actually was. It wasn't that bad.
The Joker, kind of just to piggyback on that real quick, Joker seems like he's having fun this year. Is that the feeling you got from him, that he's just loose and just kind of enjoying the moment?
He is pretty loose. Now, we'll see if they end up, 3-4 at some point this year, if he's similarly loose. But for right now, he does certainly appear to be enjoying himself. He had the ice cream truck at practice last week. That was something new that I hadn't seen my 4th year covering the team. So certainly seems to be enjoying himself quite a bit.